Hey there, my name is James Lee. Welcome to 5149, where I make videos about business, politics, and society. Today, we're going to be talking about the difference between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party in the United States. So in the span of a few minutes, I'm going to take you on an unfiltered journey documenting the transformation of the Democratic Party and the Republican Party through time and where they stand today. Let's start with the Democrats because they are the older of the two, and I was taught to respect my elders. Okay, so founded in 1828, the Democratic Party enjoyed a lot of electoral success from the get-go, winning all but two presidential elections between 1828 and 1856. And during this time, the party's main policy priorities were maintaining slavery to support the agrarian-based economy of the South and the westward expansion of the United States. Then came the bloody Civil War, which, as we all know, ended with the Union defeating the Southern Confederate States and the abolition of slavery in the U.S. After the war, the Democrats worked hard to maintain the ways of the antebellum South, focusing on policies that restricted the rights of African Americans to vote. But at the same time, a more progressive wing of the party began to take form, led by William Jennings Bryan, advocating for an expanded federal government to protect workers and alleviate increasing income inequality, problems that had become rampant during the Industrial Revolution and the Gilded Age. America, though, was not quite ready for that yet, so despite winning the party's nomination for president 3 times, Bryan lost all 3 general election contests and never became president. But then came the Great Depression, FDR, and the New Deal, which revitalized the country by enacting programs that promoted infrastructure projects and legislation that protected workers. In the middle part of the 20th century, the party paired its pro-worker economic agenda with social progressiveness, leading to civil rights reforms such as desegregation and enhanced voting protections for minorities. An extremely successful pairing, I might add. Between 1933 and 1980, the Democrats controlled Congress for all but 4 years. Fast forward to today, you could say that the Democratic Party still publicly espoused much of the same rhetoric as FDR and JFK. They invoke pro-worker sentiments and are sympathetic to marginalized groups. But something changed, which I'll get to later in this video. But first, let's rewind and follow the evolution of the Republican Party through history. The Republican Party formed in 1854 ahead of the Civil War with the goal of making America a pro-industry, anti-slavery, free labor society based on the egalitarian idea that anyone can succeed in America if they work hard. After the war, while the Democratic Party solidified its support in the agrarian South, the North industrialized very quickly, and the Republican Party of this era emphasized its Civil War triumph, earning the nickname the Grand Old Party, and promoted pro-business, free market policies, but in turn developed a reputation as the party of the elite. So when the Great Depression hit and millions of Americans lost their jobs and savings, the GOP, specifically President Hoover, was blamed for not doing enough to help people who were unemployed. This led to a pretty rough patch for Republicans. Between 1933 and 1980, the GOP only controlled Congress for 4 years. But Ronald Reagan changed all of that. Elected during a recession, he created the modern Republican platform of fiscal conservatism, small government, low taxes and deregulation, and social conservatism, restrictions on things like immigration, abortion rights, gay rights, among other things. Okay, now that we've covered all the history, let's bring this conversation to today. Where do these two parties stand now? Well, like I said, rhetorically, not much has changed for the Democrats since the 1960s. They are still known for being the party of workers and unions, along with voicing support for the marginalized population. Republicans, they still very much follow the Reagan playbook, fiscal and social conservatism. But what about in reality? Well, for the Democrats, ties to big business and special interests, specifically in the form of exorbitant campaign donations over the past decade or so, have completely eroded their ability, or in some cases, their desire to enact any true pro-worker reforms that are badly needed. For example, they talk a lot about healthcare as a human right and want to, say, pass the $15 minimum wage, but they can't bring themselves to do it because it would hurt their special interest donors. Even the provisions of the latest COVID-19 relief bill, which has been aggrandized to be some kind of second coming of FDR, is mostly all temporary. For Republicans, they like to espouse ideas like small government, low taxes, and free enterprise, but because they're also tied to big business donations, their hardcore capitalist policies have exacerbated income inequality to the degree that many Americans are having a hard time simply making enough to cover basic needs like food and shelter. Again, take healthcare, for example. They like to label Obamacare as big government socialized medicine, and they have talked on and on about repealing it for about a decade, but when given the chance, they couldn't because they know that it actually helps a lot of people in areas that are their strongholds, like Kentucky, for example. And if they repealed it, their electoral prospects would be badly impacted. This dynamic has led to some really incongruent policy positions in comparison to rhetoric and the embrace of wedge issues that neither party truly intends to solve. So today, I would argue that the most important aspect of being a Democrat or a Republican is actually mostly cultural, and whether or not you think of yourself and call yourself a Democrat or a Republican. This is somewhat of a sweeping generalization, but I don't think there are really a whole lot of fundamental legislative differences between the two parties. Sure, you could cite policy differences in things like gay marriage or abortion rights, but with these social and cultural issues, the parties have actually abdicated most of their policy-making responsibility to the courts, at least at the federal level. So today, a Republican is simply someone who self-identifies as a Republican, and a Democrat is someone who self-identifies as a Democrat, more so than any real distinctions in policy positions. After all, Mr. Republican himself, Donald Trump, has switched his party affiliation 5 times in his life, and Michael Bloomberg, the billionaire Democrat, was a Democrat until he wasn't and became a Republican mayor of New York City before ultimately becoming a Democrat again. That's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I made this video to counter all the other educational videos that are out there trying to break down the two parties by policy positions, which I think at one time would have been applicable, but to me, not so much in today's political environment, which I think highlights the need for a third or fourth major party. If you support what I'm doing here with this channel, please like the video, but more importantly, share it with people, your friends, family. That would really help us grow our community. Lastly, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already done so. My name is James Lee. Thank you for your time, and I'll see you next week.